On the morning of June 18, 2023, 5 people climbed into a carbon fiber tube the size of a minivan and were bolted shut from the outside. No way to open the hatch from within. Their destination was the wreck of the Titanic, over 2 miles down. 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, the surface ship lost contact. For 4 days, the world watched a search and rescue operation and hoped. There was nothing to rescue. The submersible was already gone, collapsed in on itself in a fraction of a second in the cold dark above the most famous shipwreck on Earth. The man who built it and who was piloting it had once said this on camera: "At some point, safety is pure waste." His name was Stockton Rush, and he charged $250,000 a seat. This is not the story of a freak accident in a place humans were never meant to go. According to the United States Coast Guard, it is the story of something else, a loss of life that was, in their own word, preventable. Let's open the ledger. To understand the implosion, you have to understand the pitch. OceanGate was founded in 2009 by Stockton Rush, a man who wanted to do for the deep ocean what private rockets were doing for space. Crack it open, break the monopoly of governments and research institutions, and sell the experience to anyone who could pay. And the most romantic destination on the planet was the Titanic, 3,800 meters down, in permanent, crushing darkness. There was just one problem. The proven way to build a deep-diving submersible was a thick sphere of titanium or steel, independently certified and tested to punishing margins. It was safe, it was also heavy, slow to build, and expensive. Rush looked at that century of hard-won caution and saw not wisdom, but a market failure. The submersible industry, he said, was obscenely safe, and to him, that was exactly why it had never grown. His fix was to do it cheaper, lighter, and faster. And the first thing sacrificed to cheaper, lighter, faster is always the same: margin, the gap between what a machine can survive and what you ask of it. Here is the first shortcut, and it is the one that killed them. Instead of a titanium sphere, Rush built the Titan's hull out of carbon fiber, the light, strong material used in aircraft and race cars. On paper, it was brilliant, far lighter, far cheaper to build, far easier to ship around the world. It had also never been used for the pressure hull of a deep-diving crewed submersible, not once. There was a reason. Carbon fiber is extraordinary at handling tension, being pulled apart. The deep ocean does the exact opposite. At Titanic depth, roughly 6,000 pounds of pressure, nearly 3 tons, bears down on every single square inch of the hull, squeezing inward. And carbon fiber's weakness under that kind of repeated compression is fatigue. Each dive presses the material, microscopic gaps form between its layers, and crucially, it does not fully bounce back. Damage accumulates invisibly, dive after dive. A titanium sphere that survives one dive will survive the next. A carbon fiber tube that survives today is quietly weaker tomorrow. Rush had built a hull with an expiration date, one he could not see and refused to properly measure. And to steer this experimental craft over 2 miles beneath the Atlantic, a $30 wireless video game controller bought off the shelf. It became the internet's favorite detail about the Titan, but it was the least of its problems. The controller only had to work for a few hours. The hull had to hold back the weight of the entire ocean. Now run the money section, because the Titan's fate was sealed not in the ocean, but in a series of decisions made on land, each one trading safety for cost and speed. Start with certification. Every serious crewed submersible is classed, independently inspected and certified by a marine body like DNV or the American Bureau of Shipping. It is slow, it is thorough, and it costs money. Rush refused. Certification, he argued, would take years and strangle innovation. So the Titan carried paying passengers to Titanic depth without ever being independently certified, a fact OceanGate handled with a waiver each passenger signed, a document that reportedly named the risk of death on its very first page. Then came the man who tried to stop it. In 2018, OceanGate's own director of marine operations, David Lockridge, inspected the Titan and wrote a report. The carbon fiber showed visible flaws, he warned, and the hull needed proper non-destructive testing, a way to scan for hidden damage without cutting the hull open before anyone climbed inside. He was told such testing was impossible and that the company would instead rely on an acoustic system to listen for the hull cracking in real time. Sit with that. The safety plan was not to keep the hull from failing. It was to hear it begin to fail, with 5 people sealed inside, and hope there was time to surface. Lockridge was fired the day after he filed his concerns. He took them to federal regulators. OceanGate sued him. He ran out of money and settled. And to the outside world, none of this friction existed. OceanGate wrapped its marketing in the names of NASA, Boeing, and a major university, until Boeing said it had never been a partner on the Titan. The credibility was borrowed. The caution was not. By 2022, the Titan had made dozens of dives, and it had begun to talk back. In July of that year, on a dive later logged as number 80, the people aboard heard it. A loud bang as the submersible came back toward the surface. Rush reportedly explained it away as the hull settling in its frame. It was not. Investigators would later conclude that the bang was the sound of the carbon fiber layers beginning to separate, delamination, the very failure Lockridge had warned about 4 years earlier. The hull's own strain sensors recorded the shift, and it never went away. From that dive on, the Titan was, in plain terms, a weaker machine. This was the moment the acoustic safety system worked exactly as promised, and it changed nothing. The warning was heard, logged, and overruled. Worse, the Coast Guard found that Rush had inflated the sub's dive count, selling a proven, reliable machine to the very people trusting it with their lives. Which brings us back to the morning of June 18th, 2023. On board, Stockton Rush at the controls. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, 77, the most experienced Titanic diver alive, a man who had earned the name Mr. Titanic. Hamish Harding, a British adventurer. Shahzada Dawood, a businessman. And beside him, his 19-year-old son, Suleman, who, by his family's account, was uneasy about the trip and went to be with his father. 5 people, 1 hull, and every accumulated flaw of the previous decade pressing inward. 1 hour and 45 minutes down, still descending, the hull reached the limit it had been quietly losing since that bang a year before. The Coast Guard's audio analysis places the implosion at around 9:34 that morning. At that depth, the collapse is faster than human thought, over before the mind can even register it. It is the one small mercy in this entire story, and the families have had to hold on to it. 4 days later, robots found the debris scattered across the seabed near the bow of the Titanic, one more wreck keeping the other company. So let's close the ledger. Final audit. What did the shortcut save? A titanium hull is heavier and costs more than carbon fiber. Independent certification costs money and, in Rush's telling, years. Non-destructive testing costs money. A cautious director of operations who keeps saying no costs you an argument. Add it all up, and cutting those corners bought OceanGate exactly 2 things: a cheaper submarine and a faster path to selling seats on it. What did they cost? 5 lives, including the man who signed off on every one of those decisions. A $250,000 ticket that turned out to be exactly that. A ticket, one way. A $50 million wrongful death lawsuit. The company itself, founded 2009, gone by the summer of 2023. 14 years, dissolved. And a 300-page federal report concluding, in the flattest possible language, that all 5 deaths were preventable. a report that also found the Coast Guard would have referred Stockton Rush himself for criminal prosecution had the ocean not reached him first. That is the hardest line in this entire ledger. Ford once priced a human life at $200,000. Takata priced its integrity at $4 a unit. Stockton Rush went one step further. He was so certain the bill would never come due that he wagered his own life on the arithmetic. The ocean called the debt in. Different decade, different machine, same disease. The numbers were never the problem. Believing you could outrun them was. Subscribe. The ledger stays open.